Who would have thought that the sharp eyes of the James Webb Space Telescope might reach the conclusion of the universe? Researchers have presently distributed a modern paper demonstrating that the universe is limited after all. Has the Webb telescope accomplished what researchers have been incapable to do in decades of work? In case the universe is unquestionably limited, this information will have far-reaching results for our understanding of astronomy and the whole world see. The address of the limit or infiniteness of the universe seemed never be completely demonstrated until the James Webb Space Telescope found unused proof. Indeed, Einstein, the incredible material science virtuoso, confused over the address of the interminability of the universe. When a writer inquired Einstein approximately this, he playfully said two things are interminable: the universe and human idiocy, in spite of the fact that I'm not very beyond any doubt almost the universe, however. In our galactic history, we people have learned one thing overall. We have regularly been off base. Individuals thought the soil was level. At that point, they thought there was, as it were, one sun. Afterward, they accepted the smooth way was the universe. And nowadays, we have gotten to be more open to the address of whether the universe has a conclusion or not. Analysts cleared out the address generally open, authoritatively besides, as they had to on the off chance that there was no proof for one or the other. Furtively, be that as it may, the camp of analysts was partitioned into two parties. On one side are those who can exceptionally well envision an boundless universe, and on the other are those for whom such an thought is out of the address. Since the innovation of the huge blast hypothesis, numerous analysts have been nearly certain that something that had a worldly starting must too have a transient and spatial conclusion. For nearly a century presently, the enormous blast has been something of a broadly acknowledged truth, and we have nearly overlooked that the thought of the enormous blast is fair, a hypothesis. The thought appeared coherent for a long time and was apparently affirmed, or at slightest upheld, by numerous perceptions. In any case, there were two signs that the thought of the enormous blast can be off base. Since the James Webb Space Telescope was able to demonstrate the presence of handfuls, in case not hundreds, of systems that existed at a time when worlds ought to not have existed at all, the ancient truths are falling absent. Analysts got to realize that their ancient builds are imperfect, and this can be not simple for numerous, since at that point, the starting of the universe has once more been an insignificant guess, with no confirmation. But how do analysts presently come up with the thought of announcing that the Webb telescope has found proof for the conclusion of space? The infinite skyline is not the conclusion. Let's, to begin with, shed a few light on what the end of the universe really is. We know an enormous skyline. It marks the restraint of what able to watch at the minute. Typically, around 46.5 billion light-years in a circle around the soil, coming about in a circle with a distance across of around 93 billion light-years. Be that as it may, this infinite horizon is by no implies the conclusion of the universe. It's, as it were, the end of the run of our telescopes and the conceivable outcomes for examination. In the event that the JAST had found proof of the last edge of the discernible universe inside this circle, at that point, this would need to be a bigger zone from which no more light can reach us, indeed due to development. But that would still not demonstrate that usually the conclusion. It would, as it were, cruel that the light from this zone is as well distant absent to reach us. Indeed, in case Webb were to discover immense void someplace past the skyline, that would still not be confirmation of the conclusion of the universe. The void may moreover fair be something like a larger than average void, we know, from local L's inside the obvious universe. When they were found, they were a challenge for our science. In brief, they ought to not really exist, since voids of this kind don't show up in Einstein's relativity conditions, and this collection of equations is still something just like the mother of astronomy nowadays. The as it were way out of the logical predicament is that voids are not really purge, but contain something that we cannot see or degree. But let's come back to the thought of the obvious universe. This conclusion has completely nothing to do with the conclusion of the genuine universe. And inside the unmistakable universe, we have not, however, found a single sign of an edge or a conclusion to the spatial or transient universe. As it were, the development, which can be watched nearly all over within the universe, gives a certain sign. Webb analyzes the extension of the universe. Let's note this once more. The extension is the accepted development of the universe from a beginning point. This starting is said to have been the huge blast. The expansion was to begin with watched within the 1920s by cosmologists such as Edwin Hubble. Hubble and his contemporaries were the primary to find assist universes within the universe. They noticed that worlds in courage absent showed up to be moving absent from us, proposing that the universe was drifting separated. This perception and other prove inevitably driven to the famous theory of the huge blast. Afterward, advance proof for this extension was found within the enormous microwave foundation radiation, but there were moreover questions. Estimations of the development rate have driven to development rate, have driven to diverse cons about depending on the scales utilized. The floating separated of the universe ought to be generally the same all over. In expansion, there were signs that the extension was expanding in certain regions of the universe, which ought to not really be the case. This raised questions almost the thought of the development of the universe and the presence of a beginning point. For a long time, the thought of extension was too something of a verification of the transient conclusion of the universe. Calculations have appeared that the universe would need to conclusion at a few point in one of these three scenarios due to extension. The enormous tear, a speculative situation in which the universe is torn, separated. The enormous solidify, where the universe solidifies when it is over, expanded, and all vitality is utilized up, and the enormous crunch in which the universe collapses at a few point. The James Webb Telescope has presently found new evidence that the universe isn't extending directly and that the thought of extension is in this manner conceivably off base. This would too kill the three conclusion scenarios. Webb demonstrates selling radiation. Were you mindful that the most recent and stunning revelations of the JOST give fuel for the hypothesis of a patterned universe? This speculation emerged from calculations and perceptions by the British physicist and Nobel Prize victor Sir Roger Penrose. Agreeing to Penrose, the growing or advancing universe closes at a few point in a scenario in which immense dark gaps have sucked in nearly all matter. At that point, there's a collapse of the space-time structure, and for some minutes, which are exterior, the measurement of time, the universe remains in a kind of zero-point state. At that point, a modern universe starts with an enormous blast. This hypothesis is additionally generally based on selling radiation, which demonstrates the data can elude from dark gaps once more, but in a modified form and in an awfully little way. Within the course of its mission, the JOST may give modern proof for the genuine presence of selling radiation. Stephen Selling was able to prove the radiation scientifically, but the real confirmation is lost. Never sometime recently within the history of space science have we been close enough to a dark gap to really degree these outflows. Maybe a few analysts will be able to attain this accomplishment by coordinating Webb's spectrometer specifically to the occasion skyline of the agent dark gap. This would give advanced confirmation of Penrose's idea of a recurrent universe and would prove that our universe does have a transient conclusion in a certain sense, but that this can be, as it were, a move and not a last conclusion. Have we arrived within the multiverse and not realized it? It's a truth that there's expanding proof in cosmology that the genuine structure and nature of our universe is patterned and multivariable. In case we combine the discoveries of quantum material science with the most recent discoveries in space science, The evidence for parallel universes and measurements gets to be increasingly concentrated and eventually leads us straightforwardly to the multiverse, a universe consisting of an interminable number of universes. In case we were ever to reach an edge of our universe, it would not truly be a conclusion in that sense, but a move. Like a border from one nation to another. Within the multiverse, parallel universes are isolated from each other by different cosmological occasions, but they are too associated. Universes can exist inside universes, which implies that other universes may be covered up inside our own. But it can too cruel that our universe is discreetly and furtively blending into another someplace. And we have not, however, recognized this threshold. Estimation contrasts within the expansion of the universe seem demonstrate such edges as seem voids or the truth that the unusually old and developed systems found by the JOST do not actually belong to our universe, but to another one. Such a limit or boundary can be characterized by physical inconsistencies or abnormal objects. Material science knows numerous limits of this kind. Envision you were to walk over the border of a nation inside Europe. On the off chance that there wasn't a sign someplace demonstrating the border crossing, you would likely, as it were, take note the alter of country from things just like the dialect of the individuals, changed street signs, or other points of interest. The JOST will once more compare information from the Infinite Microwave Foundation with real occasion and objects within the universe. Cosmologists claim to have read a lot of proof for extension and the enormous blast from the Foundation radiation. Other specialists have moreover found proof for multiverses or the eternal nature of the universe. So, what is genuine? This is exactly where unused filters and information comparisons with the leading computer frameworks and telescopes on soil might give new insights. One of the biggest ventures of this kind is the total hydro large-scale structure reenactments with all sky mapping for the interpretation of next-generation perception, or FLAMINGO for brief. This world's largest collaboration of researchers, supercomputers, and data from the leading telescopes on soil has been devoted for a long time to the large-scale comparison of information in a range to discover critical signs and peculiarities. The reenactments of the Flamingo venture have given nitty-gritty experiences into the infinite web of system clusters, fibers, and voids, and explored